Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show.
That's right. Welcome to the show, Off Field. I'm Liv Moods. No, I'm not. Nate Jackson. Liv's got the sniffles. She's got a little cough.
Hey, I can relate. I sounded like garbage on Friday.
Did you?
I don't know if I sound a lot better now, but
You look good. You sound good, Brandon Krisztal. Fresh off the flight this morning or last night?
last night got out. You know, the game starts at 1 there, over around 4-ish. Out of there by about 5:30. Got to the airport, and as Jason, our great photographer, and I got there, realized instead of flying through Phoenix, we could change to the direct.
Oh,
so we just hung out at the airport a little bit, watched Sunday Night Football, and
yeah.
landed a little before midnight. Yeah,
That little Fuddruckers or whatever.
Dude, so Jason and I were walking through the Vegas airport, and I spent a lot of time on this, but for a city that does hospitality better than anyone,
airport food's not good there.
the whole airport, he's
Burger
like,
King.
there's the Mexican place, there's a Burger King, there's a Jersey Mike's, I think there's a Wendy's, but we had Shake Shack, which was fine, and we literally walked to, because we had 3 hours, so we walked to every terminal.
Let's play some slots at the airport. That's
I thought
always fun.
about it. I was like, that's how I'm going to win my money back. But
They have a bar there too. You can just buy a bar right there.
Ended up not doing
Or
it.
buy a beer right there.
But he's like, this is Vegas airport, have good food. I'm like, absolutely not. It's crazy. And then as we're walking through, the temperature was super high in the one sea gates. And he's like, I feel like we're at a Greyhound station. I was like, kind of. No offense to our friends at Greyhound, but for being the city that does, hospitality and high-end luxury as good as anybody, the Vegas airport leaves plenty to be desired.
Plenty to be desired, but the Broncos did not leave anything to be desired, Brandon Krisztal. Broncos won 29-19, getting the monkey off their back, beating the Raiders for the first time ever in Vegas. The first time on the road versus the Raiders since 2015, nearly a decade. The Broncos, they had a fight on their hands, though. I mean, we talked about this all week long. The Broncos, we're going to get the Raiders' best. No matter where the Raiders are at in their season, their eyes widen when they see the Broncos. They get ready for that fight. They love it when the Broncos come to town because of what history has shown, that the Raiders can find a way to get the deal done versus the Broncos. But the Broncos have a new quarterback. They got a new coach. They were able to withstand the tornado of energy that happened in the first half. I talk about this all the time with you guys, Mike Shanahan. This has been the Raiders' way for decades. They come out really fast, a lot of energy, aggressive, but eventually they wilt. They're not able to withstand it or sustain it for 60 minutes. The Broncos, let's just kind of take this half by half, because it is a tale of two halves, Brandon. 13-9, the Broncos were down at halftime. What were your guys' thoughts just on the beginning of that game and going into that second half?
Well, it was one of those where they kind of felt, or they were playing the way I felt after getting to go to the F1 race, and then having just a nice night out in Vegas in terms of enjoying myself, minus a couple of poker hands that didn't go my way. But the Broncos did not go out. They actually stayed at a casino about 20 minutes from the strip because of the F1 race kind of taking over most of the strip, and even a couple of places that don't have casinos where they've stayed. So they stayed a little further out. But they definitely were sluggish out of the gate. And I was sitting next to Mike Sanford, who you work with on Channel 4, former longtime coach, and maybe he'll coach again one day.
Sitting there next to him at the game?
We sat next to each other the whole game. And at one point, I said to him, midway through the second quarter, I go, if the Broncos lose this game, I don't think they're making the playoffs. And not because they were going to be mathematically eliminated, because I thought this is a type of game that, and Sean Payton alluded to it post-game, where he's like, we would have lost this game last year. And we think of the versions of the Broncos that we've seen in the last half decade or so. They always seem to find ways to lose games against lesser opponents. That this year, they certainly have not. And it's been the Raiders twice, the Saints and Panthers, that they have completely taken care of business. The Falcons one was a better win because we think that's a solid football team,
right?
But you look at what they were able to do in the second half. And Sean Payton always talks about halftime adjustment, saying Super Bowl is the only game where we can really adjust because
you got
time. He's like, otherwise, like, you go in, takes you 90 seconds to pee. He always tells us that. Okay. Or whatever he said. 60, whatever he's like, so by the time you do that, you talk for about 2 minutes, and then you're back to the field, back up to the booth. Like, you can't really make adjustments, but they get 5-second half sacks. They obviously got it rolling with the pass game, and they did say that the man coverage early really threw them off, and the blitzing off the zero coverage.
Cover
something they haven't shown.
zero
Yep.
means they're bringing everyone, and it's man across the board with no safety help. And that stymied the Denver Broncos offense a bit in the first half. A lot of negative plays, 1 for 5 on third down in the first half were the Denver Broncos. Some penalties by McGlinchey. I mean, McGlinchey was getting out of his stance a little early there.
I'm not gonna beat him up too badly. He's been much better this year.
No, I know.
Pass protection. Max Crosby is nonstop. It is really fun to watch him, and not just in the passing game.
Yeah,
But you see him, or not just attacking the quarterback. You see him in screens. You see him, he's everywhere all day. Sean Payton said that he didn't affect the game as much as he could have. Like, okay, that's probably true because they won, but they didn't lose because of Max Crosby. The Raiders,
no.
Max Crosby was
He had
awesome.
3 tackles for losses, 5 total tackles, but he wasn't a game wrecker.
No.
And Bo Nix, again, was only sacked 1 time and 0 turnovers again. The Broncos haven't turned over the football in 15 quarters, which is a pretty insane stat, especially for a rookie quarterback. So you get into the second half, you make those halftime adjustments. Really, it was about minimizing the negative plays on first down to put you in a bind in second and third down. The third and longs were difficult in the first half for the Denver Broncos. But coming out of the gate, just like the first Raiders game, Brandon, they benefited from a timely turnover, an interception. PS2 in the first game, returned that to the house. It was like a 10-point swing there, 14-point swing. But yesterday it was Brandon Jones. He had been sick and questionable for the game, right?
Yeah, they added him late injury report Saturday, illness, but he fought through it. Big pick,
returned it down inside the 20-yard line, and then the route was on, but the Broncos were able to kind of lean on him after that. And really, the emergence of Bo Nix to Courtland Sutton took over at that point.
And I didn't get a chance to ask Bo post-game because I ended up asking about the crowd because he got asked about Courtland a couple different ways. But I did ask Courtland about the relationship with Bo Nix, and he started giving an answer about the O-line and the run. Took us different directions, but he did talk about just comfort level with Bo. And you have to think that Bo should have – it's weird when he and Troy Franklin seem so off the mark because you would think that their chemistry should be through the roof after playing together for a couple of years at Oregon.
Yeah.
But the more he plays with Courtland Sutton, and it kind of goes back to when they were getting their handed to him against the Chargers. I remember.
I don't know what.
Going in their tushies.
Oh, their tushies.
I went in. And
how would that be if like someone handed you your tushy? Like,
I don't know. How's it when someone hands you your butt?
Hand you your butt? Like,
I didn't make up the expression.
Is your butt like? How do you take? Isn't it attached to you?
It is, but then they're knocking you over and then handing it back to you. I don't.
Oh, okay, cool.
Either way, I don't want to get too bogged down in that. But I remember talking to Jason McCourty and Tiki Barber, just bumped into him at halftime about Bo Nix, and it's like this was my observation, and they kind of agreed. But it was that I just felt like he needed to play more, and I feel like I talked about that here with us. And I asked Sean Payton, does he just need to see more football? And it feels like over time.
Wait, at halftime you asked?
No, this was in like week 4. When they played the Chargers, whatever that was. Okay. And they kind of agreed. And then Sean's like, yeah, and he kind of didn't really answer the question that Wednesday when I asked it following that game. Does he just need to see more NFL football? Because he can't mimic it in practice. And I think that's part of it too. And so even the halftime adjustments that came, but there's a comfort level. And clearly he and Courtland are fine. I mean, Courtland doesn't get the separation that you'd like to see. And after the knee injury that slowed him down a little, he was never a burner. But he does just find ways to get open and finds enough space. And certainly in a 50-50 ball, you like his chances. And just the more they play together, it's one of those interesting conversations. He's on the final year of his deal next year at $15 million. What does that look like? Because he's not going to want to play. He didn't want to play this year at $15 million. So we got $1.5 million in incentives that he's about to hit. But he's got, I think, 4 or 5 touchdowns in the last 5 games, or 1 throwing touchdown. Maybe he's got 3 touchdowns. He's got 437 yards.
Clearly,
the
spear, the tip of the spear here offensively. Other than Bo Nix, Courtland Sutton had 8 catches, 97 yards, 2 touchdowns on 10 targets. So incredibly efficient stuff. Whereas on the other side of the ball, Brock Bowers, the one that we had to find a way to stop, had 10 targets, only 4 catches, 38 yards. I think PS2 locked him down, and they were able to kind of handle that well. Jacoby Myers had 10 catches, 15 targets. So clearly you focus all your attention on Brock Bowers. Something else was going to open up, but it wasn't enough to hurt him. But Courtland Sutton, another acrobatic toe tap touchdown in the end zone. It seems like every time that ball goes up to him in the end zone, it's a kind of an inevitability. He stood up and yelled to the crowd, I do this shit. I do this shit. He does do this shit.
That's what he does.
Over and over again, Courtland Sutton.
does.
But then also, like, that unlocks the other players. I think Devon Vele stepping up, 6 catches for 80 yards. Marvin Mims, 3 for 44. Troy Franklin had 31 yards on 2 catches. One of them was 26 yards down the middle of the field on a seam where he bent it in versus 2 deep safety. But you talked about those deep shots down the sideline that still aren't coming. To me, that's the last sort of link in this chain, is the ability to uncork the cannon on a deep ball down the sideline. That's football 101. I mean, you remember that in the street. You draw it on your chest, go long, and you fucking go long. And they have not been able to connect on a deep ball, not one deep ball yet down a sideline this season. There's been some back shoulder stuff. Now they've tried with Troy Franklin. They haven't really tried with Courtland. Yeah, they have. They've tried. So that's, to me,
they tried with Marvin Mims once.
Yes, but that's the last sort of connecting point there. But this offense is clearly coming alive. Bo Nix feeling more comfortable throwing down the middle of the field. The middle of the field is a really important place to be able to move the football. And Russell Wilson didn't really do much of that, But Devon Vele looking really strong. The running game, though, not too good.
Wasn't great, and I think that's also a credit to the Raiders, but it didn't need to be. They finished with 60-something total rushing yards. Bo never really got out and got going for big gains. They're clearly still having a hard time figuring out the running back rotation with 3 solid runners, plus Marvin Mims 3.5, because they line him up at running back enough a handful of times, and that's 3 to 4 snaps that he's the tailback on the field that's going to take Javonte or Jaleel or Audric Estime off the field. And they're going to need to run the ball against good teams. They're going to have to figure out, coming up against the Colts, certainly, but definitely against the Chargers, how to run it a little, because the Chargers D we know is really good. We're going to see them tonight against the Ravens and brother on brother action with the Harbaugh family, like we saw in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago when Jim was with the Niners. And so I do think that you have to stay as committed to the run as you can, but they've run the ball, I think, well enough that it does keep defenses honest to a degree. And the Raiders are just undermanned. I'll be interested to see, I saw Tom Telesco in the press box, what he's able to do in the draft in the coming years to improve that defense, because we know Christian Wilkins is hurt. The kid Tyree Wilson, who was a top pick a couple of years ago, I think he can play number 9, and obviously Max Crosby's next level. But after that, I don't think they have anybody else on their team that could even come close to starting on most teams.
Yeah. Sometimes these rushing yards can be a little bit misleading as far as what your idea is on how to move the ball and protect it. The Broncos offense relies on these quick passes that basically take the form of runs. They're quick, not vertical passes, but horizontal passes to a guy right here that's a very high percentage throw, a high percentage catch. He's going to catch it at 2 yards. He's going to pick up maybe 4 or 5. That's as good as a run. Bo's completion percentage in the last couple of weeks has been very good because of these short passes, and you're asking a guy when he catches a short pass to make some guys miss. And if he does, that's a big play. If he doesn't, it's a 2, 3, 4 yard gain, as good as a run. And so sometimes, when you're looking at these rushing yards, you're thinking that they're not possessing the ball effectively. But those short passes do take the form of those runs, and they still did, outpossess the Raiders 31 minutes to 29 minutes. And so even without committing to the run, the Broncos still found a way to control the ball. And so that's what that quick passing stuff does. But in the second half, right before that Brandon Jones interception, Broncos came out and had to punt, the third down ball batted down by Snowden. And I thought, who's going to be the next guy to make the tackle? Julian Assange?
Once Snowden made the
Snowden. I'm like, Snowden. Wow,
yeah,
I didn't know he had those skills. But Brandon Jones' interception followed, and then the kind of the momentum shifted, of course. And the Broncos continue to not turn the football over at all.
It's pretty
remarkable.
And
the Raiders continue to turn it over at a remarkable clip. The two turnovers that the Raiders had and the 0 that the Broncos had, probably the story of the game.
Well, and the second one that came felt inevitable. We were at the game against the Cardinals, and you're watching that preseason game thinking, Desmond Ridder just doesn't have it.
Yeah.
and that's why he ultimately doesn't make the Cardinals maybe opening roster. If he did, and he's on the practice squad. The Raiders need him because Aiden O'Connell, I think, broke his thumb or something a couple weeks ago, and I didn't realize Desmond Ridder was on the Raiders.
Yeah.
And then he comes in like, oh, here's Aiden O'Connell. I'm like, that's not Aiden O'Connell. Oh, it's Desmond Ridder. I was like, oh, the Broncos have this in the bag. He did make one big play down the field. That was just a kind of an easy throw. I want to say it was to Myers or Tucker that picked up some yardage, but that was it. And in crunch time, there was never any concern that Desmond Ridder was going to go beat you. And then they get that late strip sack from Nick Bonito.
Yep.
But the Brandon Jones one was just as big as when, in terms of momentum shifting, as the Pat Surtain one was. It Pat Surtain one's a 14-point swing, and because they're going in, they're at least going to get a field goal, but they're probably going to punch it in. I mean, they're inside the 10 or the 12 when they throw that pick in the first game here, and then yesterday, Gardner Minshew, he has, for as many good plays as we've seen him make in his career, he has moments like that, and it was a really bad throw, and it was an easy interception. We've seen a couple this year, whether it was the one Cody Barton dropped in New Orleans, the one he caught last week against the Falcons, that Brandon, it's like you're just playing catch. You didn't have to raise his arm. It just hits him right in the stomach, and he's off to the races, and that was kind of all she wrote.
Gardner Minshew and Bo Nix, both 25 of 42. Bo had the 2 touchdowns and the 0 picks. Gardner had 1 touchdown and had that interception that you mentioned. The Broncos had 5 sacks in the second half. That defense is playing at a very high level and making it really hard on quarterbacks.
Even without Zach Allen, that was a conversation that Mike Sanford and I had in the first half. I was like, oh, they really do miss Zach Allen.
Yeah.
Not that you could quantify it in real time and say, oh, Zach would have made that play, but Ini Uwazurike didn't, although Ini did get a sack, so it was good to see him.
Wazurike?
Yeah,
yeah. Did you see he was happy, not just because he hasn't had a sack in a while, but because he bet on himself on the over. There. So
over half a sack.
That's right.
That was not a prop available, I don't think.
But yeah, good to see Wazurike back out there after a year-long suspension.
Can I ask you just a Bo Nix broader question? Because you look at his numbers. Well, I guess we can finish the second half, but
that's fine.
You look at his numbers, you look at his production since week 3, really, where he's got 16 passing touchdowns and 2 interceptions.
Yep. And
then a couple more on the ground and a reception, a touchdown reception. So I think it's 19 or 20 total touchdowns in that time. It's really, I'm surprised. I'm not surprised that he got to this point. I'm surprised that he's as effective as he is this early in his career. But I didn't know for sure that he would get there. Yeah. But I certainly didn't expect him to get there by week 8 or 9 of the season. And now, as they're going into week 13, where he looks as in command of his offense as any quarterback in the league, just about.
I'm not that surprised. I think the marriage is a very good one. I think Sean Payton liked Bo Nix from the jump. So much so, I had a feeling they were going to draft him a month or 2 before because they didn't mention him at all. It was like, don't even pretend he doesn't exist. Let's talk about Michael Penix. Sure. Yeah. Let's tell Peyton Manning the week before to talk about JJ McCarthy. Right. How they like them. Like, let's create all these smoke screens outside of Bo. Bo, 61 starts in college, went through adversity, Auburn to Oregon, played in incredible, efficient football. 45 touchdowns last year to 3 picks at Oregon, a ton of experience, been through some hardship, kind of a renegade dude, like Sean Payton himself. I think Sean Payton sees a lot of himself in Bo Nix, maybe not the scrambling ability, but the attitude, the moxie. You saw that clip yesterday from when he was staring down that dude and talking shit to him with like wide eyes. Yeah. You saw that, right? Yeah. You were at the game. You might not have saw the broadcast, but Bo's not backing down. He's got, he what is he? Piss vinegar? What is it? Is that what it is? Piss and something vinegar, about vinegar in your urine. Yeah. Anyway, Bo Nix
vinegar is not going to hydrate.
He's got a lot of spunk. He's ready for a fight. Sean Payton, I think, is like this from the jump. And also, we got to give a credit to the Broncos defense and the complete football that they're playing. If Bo Nix was being relied upon in the same way as, let's say Drake May or something like that, maybe his year isn't looking as good. He has the benefit of playing next to a top 3 defense and not having to, even though they've been scoring a lot of points, not having to carry it by himself, playing mistake-free football. I don't know, man. You see him running around out there. He kind of looks like Drew Brees a little bit. And so I think
Chase Daniel said that. I think Chase, who's very high on the Bo Nix fan club bandwagon.
Yeah. And so I'm not super surprised, just because I think the coaching is very, very good. And also the players around him are coming together. A lot of times we look at a quarterback's play and we look at it in a vacuum. Here's your completion percentage, your touchdowns, your interceptions, your QBR. But what is everyone else doing to contribute to that? The offensive line playing at an incredibly high level. Okay, he has got a ton of time in the pocket. His receivers coming together. Young players stepping up, making plays. Sean Payton creating good game plans. The defense playing very well. Special teams had a couple bad plays yesterday, but for the most part playing well as well. So I think it's a complete team coming together, and he's the inflection point there. But it's something we can all feel really good about.
Well, and the better he plays, the more it raises everyone's confidence. That's what great players and certainly great quarterbacks do. Max Crosby's a great player. Von Miller was a great player here for a lot of years. J.J. Watt in Houston, even when he was with Andre Johnson. Those guys, Aaron Donald, can't win you a Super Bowl on their own. They need a quarterback. They need an offense that's going to get going. And what's funny, too, is I think rightfully so, people were critical of the Broncos' weapons beyond. You like the running back mix. Just wanted to see Jaleel get involved, but you looked at for explosiveness. You wanted to see, okay, can Javonte get back to where he was? He's shown that at times. What could estimate be? And he was obviously hurt. You knew what Courtland Sutton is and what he isn't. And then you're like, oh, maybe Dulcich is that Joker type player that we always hear Sean talk about. We'll see what Josh Reynolds can bring. And obviously he's been banged up. And we talked about how disappointing Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin looked in the offense in the preseason, especially at camp and some of the big drops they had. But you knew that the physical gifts were there. And it's a credit to them as players and to the Broncos for sticking with them, that they not only didn't cut either of them, despite what people said, but that they started to implement them into the offense more, so much so with Marvin Mims. He's lined up in the backfield, but that allows you on 3rd and 7, he leaks out. Nobody's covering him, and he gets a huge gain, almost scores. And by adding just those two guys to the mix, I don't think they're done at the skill spots, certainly at the wideout spot and tight end in the coming years in terms of their personnel growth. But it feels like both Franklin and Mims will be a part of whatever that mix is. With Sutton, it becomes a question of contract. And
Vele certainly.
Oh, and Vele, of course. Yeah, that's.
And then a little Jordan Humphrey, who they really like. I'm just wondering where Josh Reynolds fits in here.
I think that's why why he wasn't active.
Right. And so it's like, do you really want to upset the apple cart, as they say, when things are rolling like this? You mentioned Greg Dulcich, and ever since he sat down, the Broncos offense has been playing a whole lot better with Lucas Kroll. Now they're not throwing him the ball a lot, but Lucas Kroll is doing the little things that's allowing this offense to move. He's a cog in the machinery, and the machinery's working much more effectively. Sometimes when you got a guy, like Dulcich, where you're like, we should be finding ways to get him the ball, it stymies your offense because there's a hiccup in it because you're trying to get this guy going when you can't get him going. There was a little bit of that with Marvin Mims. They found a way, like you said, to get Marvin Mims going. I actually don't think there's a problem with the skill position players right now on this team. I think you got to feel really good about what you're getting from these guys. And then, of course, every season you upgrade, right? Every season you try to make your team better based on the options you have, the draft pick you have. I would say tight end is going to be more of a priority than receiver, though, personally, if these guys continue to develop this way. Troy Franklin is playing a lot better football. Marvin Mims is playing a lot better football. Devon Vele looks like a legit number 2 guy to me. And the plays he can make, the consistency, the hands, the toughness, the willingness to go across the middle and catch all these balls. And we haven't even really thrown him a 50-50 ball in the end zone yet. And then little Jordan Humphrey is a jack of all trades who's actually out there on the first play of the game. He is a starter, whether or not you look at little Jordan Humphrey as a starter. He's starting opposite Courtland Sutton. Why? Because he blocks. He blocks his ass off. He's a former running back. He can run with the ball in his hands, and they clearly like him enough to not pull him off the field after 2 pretty big fumbles. My point is that this receiver crew I really like, and I think that this is a good enough crew to make some waves in the playoffs if you can get Bo Nix and these guys on the same page and get a favorable matchup in the first round.
The one thing we know about wideouts in general, and I remember Daniel Jeremiah saying this to me at the Combine a couple of years ago, that this draft has a shitload of wide receivers in it. And you can say that about the next 10 years because of the way football's developing. And you look at last year's draft, because this was 2 years ago, you said, but last year's draft, we think Rome Odunze is going to be pretty good. Malik Neighbors just wants the ball thrown to him. Xavier Worthy, obviously, he's super, super fast and in the right situation. Ladd McConkey, we're going to see on Monday Night Football tonight. I'm just throwing a couple names out there that come to mind. And so I think you're right about where this current wide receiver room is. I don't know what the future is for Courtland Sutton, but he has number one traits in terms of the clutch, catch on third down, certainly a 50-50 ball, and finds the end zone and is more than a willing blocker in the run game. But let's just say that he's not back next year, not back in the next year or two. It's really interesting to think about what an A.J. Brown type player, and I'm just picking a top flight wide receiver, A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra. We could go down the list, but any of those teams that have your true, and I don't know if Brandon Ayuk's there, and now he's coming off the knee thing.
Yeah.
But that true number one, those guys are making $30 million. Tyreek Hill, although he's more unique with his skill set. What adding that type of Michael Thomas before the knee injury, guys like that.
Well, what's stopping us from thinking?
I think you're right about Vele as a 2, and Franklin and Mims is like what Ted Ginn was.
Well, who knows if Vele can't be a 1?
That'd be
a Marcus Colston type. That would be a Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas wasn't a first-round player. He was not drafted. He was a second, third?
Second round. Well, and he and Courtland are the exact same size. They kind of play differently. They're the same size, but Courtland actually is coming out of the draft was 0.03 of a second faster. It was like a 4.45 to 4.48 or something.
Courtland just needs to
4.58,
unleash the beast when he catches the ball and break tackles and turn into a violent runner. Like Brandon Marshall.
Yeah, you played with one of the best to ever do it.
Brandon Marshall would catch the ball and then look for a fight. He would look around and realize, I got a weapon here and I can hit you with it. Courtland Sutton doesn't really do that. He kind of, is always leaning forward a little bit and kind of doesn't have his base under him like a boxer who's ready to do that. And I think that if he did and didn't always have the forward lean and kind of step back on his haunches a little bit, could get some more yards after the catch if he was able to root himself and kind of be a little more shifty and then use one of these hands as a punching tool. They allow you, like you're a DB, I can smack you in the face.
Yeah.
I can't grab it, but I can smack you in the face mask. And the stiff arm is an incredible tool for a ball carrier.
Derrick Henry does it all the time. But is that something that can be taught? The run after catch thing feels like it is
a little bit, yeah. So I was talking with Jake Plummer the other day about this, and he was like, when he was here when Brandon Marshall was a rookie, and Brandon had caught a pass or something and got tackled, and he came to the sideline, and Jake told him, you should be ashamed letting one DB bring you to the ground. Look at you and look at them.
Right.
Don't ever let one of those guys tackle you. And Brandon Marshall, he turned into what he did, and he credits Jake as that moment that made him realize how truly powerful he was. When you're standing next to Courtland Sutton, you realize how truly powerful and strong and how much of a physical specimen he is if he could only remember it and unleash that physicality on the people trying to tackle him, not just going up and getting the ball, but inflicting punishment on those who try to stop him. I think that could unlock a new level of his game.
Yeah, it's just weird to think that he can do it in year 8. I'm not saying he can't. I don't know.
Well, I mean, look, there's the ACL, right? And so when you're coming back from the ACL, you're thinking about things other than what I'm talking about. You just want to know what is this?
Yeah, you're like, just go. Just go, right?
No, you don't want your knee not to break.
No.
You want the cuts and the reactive stuff. You're thinking about that. You're not thinking about your opponent and smashing him in the face. You're thinking about your own legs and the stability of your own cuts and things like that. There's so many compartments you got to and think about when you're playing football, and you don't want, there's a period of like accepting that you're healthy and not thinking about your body anymore. That, I want to credit Courtland Sutton because he didn't miss time coming back from that ACL. He played that whole season right after and didn't have the greatest first season. What year did he tear that? 21?
So 19, he makes the Pro Bowl. I want to say he tore it in 20.
Okay.
Did he maybe do it on that Monday night game against the Titans early, like week 1 or 2?
Okay.
Maybe, or it was early. Maybe he played against it. I just remember it being really early. And
that 19 was his only 1,000-yard receiving
game.
Yeah. And he's on pace right now for another one. He's got 744 yards.
Which is about where he finished last year.
Yeah, exactly. He's got 5 touchdowns this year. He had 10 last year. So
you have to pick that up if he wants to match that.
Yeah, I mean, he just needs one in each of the last 5 games. There's 5 games left. So if he averages about 50 yards a game, he'll get over 1,000. I think he can do that. He's got 57 catches, and he's eighth in the league, which is higher than he's finished in a long time. Tied, coincidentally, with Brock Bowers for 744 yards. Both of them. Brock Bowers has 74 catches.
Yeah, only 4 yesterday on those.
Yeah, only 4 for 38 yards. They basically shut him down. But yeah, Courtland Sutton, he's taken a lot of heat as far as him not being a true number one. Right now, he is playing like
he is playing like a number one. I think it is that separation thing. The idea that all those other guys that you mentioned can catch the ball and pull away from the defense, or can be far enough away they catch it, turn it up, and go. And there's a lot of guys that aren't even necessarily true number one. I guess I don't know what like a Jalen Waddle is when you're playing with a Tyreek Hill. Maybe on another team would be, but Courtland's never really had that anyway, and he has it even less now. And so, because I remember like Larry Fitzgerald in the World Series, Larry Fitzgerald in the Super Bowl, and he's a decade into his career at that point or close to it. He catches that pass on a slant and turns up the middle of the field and runs, straight down the dead center of the field. You're like, oh, Larry Fitzgerald, even in 7-8 years in, can still do that.
Yeah,
and Courtland's never really had that. You think about guys though that run well after the catch, and Steve Smith was the first one I always think of. Ran like a running back, like caught the ball and then looked like Javonte Williams out there, kind of. Yeah. But Brandon Marshall was close, and he looked more like Derrick Henry. With the level of eyes. And for the criticism of little Jordan Humphrey's ball security, you mentioned that he was a running back. Both he and Javonte, and I don't know if we can find the numbers or not, they have to be pretty high on like don't go down at first contact, whatever that is. Both of them break an initial tackle pretty consistently. And so Courtland should just be able to look at those guys, because I don't think Lil Jordan's that much bigger or stronger than Courtland. They're about
they're about the same size. Both big boys, about 6'4", 220-pound receivers. But Lil Jordan just kind of has that dog in him in a little bit of a different way. That's why he's out there on the field, with that first unit. All right, I do want to give some props to the Broncos field goal unit.
Will Lutz is going to be the special teams player of the week, probably.
5 for 5 in field goals, 2 for 2 in extra points. That unit that let him down a couple weeks ago came up big yesterday.
He's 13 of 13 since that Chiefs blocked kick. And trust me, if that kick goes through, the Broncos win that game.
You think?
I know it in my heart. I know.
Wow.
But 13 of 13.
That's quite a take on a Monday.
Well, I'm just saying, if that kick isn't blocked.
If that kick isn't blocked, the Broncos are
through the uprights. They win
8-4.
And
wow.
And how do you feel? But even at 7-5, and 7-5 doesn't sound as cool as 8-4 does. But I think they're still 2 games clear of
Miami, who's in the 8th spot.
Miami's got, and I saw where Miami's 32% or 36% to make the playoffs. So I don't know if that says more about, because who's the other?
No, I laugh at the percentages. Is that PFF doing that? What is this?
I don't know whose percentage.
Some nerds in their basement,
some people who are better at math than me,
drinking Monster energy drinks.
Use their computers. I could use a Monster energy drink. But the Broncos truly do control their own destiny. They don't need anyone's help. They can help themselves and jump up a spot or two by just continuing to win. They're going to go head-to-head with the Chargers in a couple weeks, and that'll be big for that playoff seeding. Neither of them are catching the Chiefs. It's just not going to happen. The Chiefs aren't going to fall off.
You don't think
that far? I wouldn't think.
They almost lost to the Panthers.
Almost. They're really good at finding ways to win games, even against lesser teams.
Yeah, they are. Yep, they are.
But to Will Lutz, he's going to be special teams player of the week. I would bet 5 for 5 on field goals. I don't think anyone, unless somebody returns a kick tonight for one of those 2 AFC teams, they might have a chance, or hit 6 of 6 or 7 of 7. But I don't know if his leg's as big as maybe Brandon McManus's was when he was here. It's
pretty big.
But he's been really good from right around 50 yards, and he's been even better. He's missed 2 kicks all year, not counting that block, or was that one of the 2?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, it's 1 from 60 last week or whatever.
All I know is when I look at a kicker, I look at his body language. I look at the confidence level. I look at what the kicks do, the ones that go in. Are they close? Are they winding a little bit? Is he like, no, everything he's kicking is right down the freaking center. He has a lot of confidence in his operation right now, and these guys have it cleaned up, and obviously putting more of an emphasis on it ever since that block, and taking pride in wanting to get it right. And they did. 17 points for him yesterday, if you had him on your fantasy team, which I did. 5 for 5 field goals, 2 for 2 extra points. So want to give props to Will Lutz and that whole operation for getting that taken care of. A couple bad special teams plays, though. They gave up a return, 59-yarder, and they also gave up a fake punt. Caught him sleeping a little bit after what's-his-face left, the special teams coach,
Midge,
uh,
Tom McMahon.
no. I'm talking two weeks ago.
Mike
after the block
Westhoff.
kick,
Mike Westhoff.
Mike Westhoff went away because he wasn't feeling, but he was
The special teams coach, Tom McMahon, who was here for a lot of years, is the Raiders special teams coach. He was not at the game yesterday.
Which
Anyway,
nobody cares
but
about.
Mike
which
Westhoff,
no one
yes.
even thinks about. I'm talking about Mike Westhoff, the Broncos special teams coach, who was pulled out of retirement to come here. And then the block kick happened, and coincidentally, he leaves that week. The guy who's a legend, and Sean Payton talks about if assistant coaches can make it into the Hall of Fame, this guy should be one of them, leaves the building, and all of a sudden you have a special teams let down in 2 phases. You think that had anything to do with Mike Westhoff's departure?
I guess I don't know. I do think I was told that field goal protection, was under Mike's purview.
Well, yeah, he's a special teams coach.
Well, but they split it up with Chris Banjo, who's the assistant, Ben Kutwika, who's the special teams
split them up.
coordinator.
They didn't just work together on the stuff.
They kind of had their own. Excuse me. They broke it down like who has kickoff.
Well,
in terms
it's
of
a little unusual.
Well, most teams don't have 3 special teams coaches. They usually have 2.
Yeah.
And maybe one of them's a kick specialist, which I don't know if any of these guys really are. The way Robbie Gold, longtime kicker, his brother Chris, who you'd hear people talk about Beep, he's with the Chargers still. Chris was a kicker like Robbie and is in charge of all the special teams. He's a football guy, but he was also tasked with working with the kickers on their technique, and not every team does have that. Either way, there were some letdowns. Sean said post-game they knew a fake was coming. He goes, because bad teams will take chances because they need to find something.
If you knew it was coming, then why was he so fucking
We just didn't know when.
Come on. That sounds like, because Sean Payton, did a surprise onside kick in the first game of the season last year. Is that what bad teams do? No. I mean, yes, but no. At the same time, if you knew it was coming, you should have stopped it. I don't like that. But ultimately, you found a way to win, beat the Raiders for the first time in Vegas ever, for the first time on the road against the Raiders in nearly a decade, 29-19. As Sean Payton said, they showed some real grit. Sean Payton said, our team a year ago doesn't win this game, but this team did. What do you think he means by that, Brandon?
It's hard when he's using, I'm going to call it coded language, but there's always
Russell's gone, and Bo is here.
Well, and so we actually had that conversation in between when Sean was talking and Bo came in. And I'm talking with some longtime media folks about a couple of weeks ago. Someone was asked about Bo's ability to scramble and the scramble drill. And he goes, yeah, usually really smart quarterbacks are really good in scramble drills too, because they understand spacing and all this, and they're able to find their guys. And so that made me think, well, Russell Wilson's perhaps the best scrambling quarterback of all time. I guess Patrick Mahomes is kind of challenging every category that you want to break passers down by. But in general, he's as good as anyone ever outside of the pocket, getting the ball down the field and making something happen. And is he the exception to the rule? I'm not saying Russell isn't a smart quarterback, but there were criticisms about his ability to process quickly, see the whole field. And so when Sean said that, though, a couple weeks ago when we were in the atrium when it was snowing out, and I was like, wait, so is Russ a smart quarterback, or he's just saying Bo's a smart quarterback, and most smart quarterbacks are good in scramble drills? Either way, though, when he says stuff, I'm always thinking like, oh, this year we have Bo, last year we didn't.
Yeah. And, we talked about Courtland Sutton's 10 touchdowns. Russell threw those to him last year, so let's give Russ a little bit of credit. He's also, 4-1 or 5-1 as a starter now in Pittsburgh.
A bunch of those touchdowns last year did come on scramble drills.
Yeah, exactly.
But he still threw them.
Exactly.
And they got caught.
Although Russell, did you see that game on Thursday? That Hail Mary? Nobody tried to catch the ball.
Yeah.
Nobody even tried. So I felt bad for Russell there. He actually bought time, throws it, gets popped, and the ball just lands in the middle of the end zone with no Steelers around. They were presumably more interested in fighting with the Bengals, or not the Bengals.
The Steelers fans.
Steelers, yeah. No, not the Steelers fans.
The Steelers and
the Browns.
Browns
Who they play. But anyway, I think we got the better quarterback, and obviously longevity's on our side here with Bo Nix. But Sean Payton clearly was super freaking stoked after the game. Like, you saw him run into the middle. He's like, relative to this win. And he was super.
But we touched on this off the top, kind of with those comments from Sean about, because he just came in and he didn't always do an opening statement that's long. But yesterday's was about 90 seconds off the top. And that's what he said was this team last year doesn't win it. And that
Yeah.
was previous teams that predated him, whether it was Nathaniel Hackett's teams, Vic Fangio's teams, Van Joseph's teams. They would find ways to lose games like that, especially to the Raiders in years where we thought they were maybe a better roster.
Oh, yeah.
And they would still find a way to lose. We can go back to Jamarcus Russell coming in, and maybe that was even.
What about Mike Shanahan Ring of Fame Day when Josh McDaniels is coaching the Raiders and comes in here
Yeah.
and Vic Fangio lays an egg?
Yep.
And the Broncos got absolutely annihilated in front of the whole Mike Shanahan cohort on a day that was supposed to honor Coach Shanahan and his domination of the Raiders and his rivalry with the Raiders, and the Broncos couldn't get it done against them. So the Raiders have had the Broncos number, won 8 of the last 9 against the Broncos, and then almost a decade since they've won on the road against the Raiders, and they got that done. So okay, so what are we looking forward to? Because we got the Browns coming up, then the bye, right? And then the Colts, and then flexed into a Thursday night game against the Chargers, and then on the road against Cincinnati, and then finishing it here on January 5th against the Kansas City Chiefs. What's the Broncos' outlook here before we get out of here? DK?
I think you've got to be encouraged because kind of to the point about they didn't win games like this in the past. Against bad teams, they're winning. The Browns are a bad team on paper in terms of where their record is, but they've got a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. They have perhaps the best defensive player in football, as Myles Garrett reminded us, both with his play and then his comments post-game.
Yeah.
To TJ Watt.
Yeah.
But they're really banged up in some spots in their secondary. The Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, JOK, who's as good.
He's no joke.
He's no joke. He's as good a linebacker as there is in football, maybe this side of Roquan Smith and Fred Warner, but really, really good. There's talk that his career might be in jeopardy with the injury he suffered a couple of weeks ago. They're good up front, led by our pal Shelby Harris. You can check out Weird the Harris is coming out again this week. Last week with the Thursday game, they had to take a sabbatical from it, but they will be back this week. But they're really good up front. And then on offense, Jameis giveth and taketh away, but he definitely can make plays, and they're talented with Jerry Jeudy making plays.
Jerry Jeudy having a career year.
And they've got Nick Chubb back, and he and Ford are a nice kind of 1-2 punch. So it's not going to be a cakewalk, but against lesser teams all year long, that's the difference between this team and previous iterations of the Broncos in recent years. They have beaten the bad teams soundly, and there wasn't doubt by the end of the game. Even yesterday with the Raiders driving, I don't think anybody thought they were going to come back and win that game.
The ultimate test is going to be, can you beat the good teams, right? Broncos almost beat a good team a couple weeks ago against the Chiefs. They beat presumably a pretty good team against the Falcons, held them without a touchdown. So this defense is clearly the tip of the spear, my opinion, with what's going on here, and sets the precedent. And then this offense just has to find a way to cobble together enough points to win. And they've been doing that. And they're averaging over 25 points over the last 6 games or 8 games or something like that. A lot of stats right now suggesting the excellence of the Broncos. What they got to do is not start smelling themselves like, according to Coach Prime, CU did in advance of this Kansas game. Do you have thoughts on the way that went down, BK?
I wasn't surprised, and I said as much last week, and people that asked me about my beloved Jayhawks, my alma mater, they've underperformed all year. They were a top 25 team that came off a big bowl win. They were getting their quarterback, who was injured most of the year, in Jalen Daniels, back. He was wildly inconsistent early, had some terrible interceptions, especially against Illinois, but they lost 6 games to this point. 5 of those 6 losses, they had the lead in the fourth quarter, including at West Virginia, where they had the lead in the final minute. Against K-State, they had the lead in the final couple minutes in Manhattan. They had only lost 4 in the transfer portal, and they have a really good running back who set every Kansas record in a place where guys like John Riggins and Gale Sayers played in college. So Arrowhead isn't Lawrence, and there were some empty seats you could see, even with Coach Prime and Travis Hunter and Shador coming. But Kansas has picked it up to where everybody thought they should have been all year. They were fighting just for their lives to get into a bowl game and get a little extra practice. But I wasn't surprised. I was surprised at how effectively they ran the ball and how poor CU's run defense was when it had been really good, especially when you go to like their game against UCF, who had been the nation's best rushing team to that point. So that's what surprised me. And they're still mathematically alive, but they're going to need some serious help to get to that Big 12 title game.
Yeah. Travis Hunter, the odds-on favorite to win the Heisman. He had 8 catches for 125 yards and 2 touchdowns, but was not the best player on the field that day. Devin Neal was. He had 37 carries, 207 yards, 3 touchdowns, 4 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown. I mean, when you're running the ball that effectively, obviously you get that kind of attention, and Travis Hunter was just couldn't harness that. I think it was probably Pat Shermer's worst game in a while. They weren't able to control the clock at all. CU possessed the ball for 20 minutes to KU's 40 in that game.
Hard to win games like that unless you're doing what the Chiefs offense has done before. There's like
CU rushed for 43 yards to KU's 333 yards.
Wow.
And so, even the Shooter Sanders it was 23 of 29, 266 yards and 3 touchdowns, a very efficient game. Once again, they couldn't really stay on the field and take the ball away from CU, which really just kind of pushed the knife in, and CU had no answer for it. Coach Prime did talk about basically reading your own press clippings all week, kind of getting enamored with all the praise. Do you think that had anything to do with it, or just KU, better than CU, or did CU sort of start believing all the hype that's happening around them?
I guess it could kind of be a little bit of all of that. I always have a hard time with the idea that critics or pundits or fans or whomever are saying, "Oh, this team's really good. They're the best team in the Big 12." And that you're going to take your foot off the gas. But I guess there's some human nature. Like, we're just going to roll in.
Yeah, there's definitely some psychology and human nature to it. I mean, the best coaches I've ever been around, when you talk about and prepare a team, when you talk about your opponent, you talk about all the things they're good at. You make them start feeling good about themselves. Now, behind closed doors, we're breaking apart their weaknesses. We're fixing to go mess them up. But you praise them. You tell them how good they are, and then they start believing it, and they let down. It's only human nature. And so, Coach,
you always think I'm disagreeing with you. I'm just weighing.
I'm still learning your body language.
Yeah,
right?
I'm just processing it.
But I think that this is, like Coach Prime said, a very teachable moment for this team to understand how to handle expectations, because the idea was that these guys are all but in the Big 12 championship game. I mean, really, right?
People were booking flights to Dallas. The flights from here to Dallas went up because I was kind of keeping an eye on them. Where we're going to be going.
You said that there's still a mathematical chance. What has to happen? Do you know?
This one I actually do need. I do need to get out the abacus, because it is not easy to understand.
So if they don't make the Big 12 championship, what bowl are they going to be in? What does the postseason look like for them? If they don't make the Big 12 championship, they have
like the Holiday Bowl.
What, one more game and then the bowl game, and then that's it? Like, do they?
Could they
get into the college football playoffs?
With 3 losses, all those SEC teams are going to get in ahead of them.
Okay.
So if they don't get to the Big 12 championship, even as much fun as it would be for the TV networks that want to put Coach Prime and Shador and Travis Hunter and the rest of the Buffs in one of those top 12 spots, you're going to have a hard time saying that they're better than Ole Miss or Alabama or some of these teams that also have 3 losses or will have 3 losses. But they need, I think the easiest way is for them to win on Friday, and then they need both Houston. So they need to beat Oklahoma State, and they need BYU to lose to Baylor's playing Houston.
Okay.
They need Arizona State to lose to Arizona, or Iowa State to lose. I guess that's the easiest way. BYU is playing Houston, so they need Houston to pull another upset. They need K-State to beat Iowa State, and they need Arizona to beat Arizona State. That game's in Tucson. The K-State Iowa State game is in Manhattan. The BYU game is in Houston against the Cougs. So
a lot of stuff you can't do anything about if you're a CU player. Just got to stay focused on the task.
If Arizona State and Iowa State both win, it's Arizona State, Iowa State, in Dallas in 2 Saturdays on the 7th.
Okay. So last year, the CU Buffs lost 8 of their last 9 after winning their first 3, ended up 4-8, lost their offensive coordinator and their defensive coordinator. 44 new players hit the portal here. So understandably, there was a lot of skepticism as to whether or not the Buffs could turn it around and be a winning team. They are a winning team. They're 8-3. They were 8-2, so it has to be looked at as a success. But they're always going to be thinking, unless something like that happens, what you just talked about, what could have been if they would have gone to KU and taken care of business. But CU bus fall to Kansas 37-21, and the Broncos win 29-19 and got the monkey off their back in Vegas, winning for the first time ever in Sin City. Hey, that's it for us, BK. On off field, I'm Liv Moods. And we'll see you guys on Wednesday on off field. Have a great day. Bye now. Is anybody behind the glass?